Don't know much about colonoscopy. Okay, let's look at the games. I guess I'll take turns. I have 5 games from the U.S. Championship and 5 games from the U.S. Women's Championship. The games are all decisive, which means somebody won. They weren't draws. And they were ones that I enjoyed. Maybe these aren't my 10 favorite games, but they're 10 games that I found where somebody won, and I was like, oh, I like that game. I'd already seen all the games, so I knew which ones I liked. And so forth. Okay, so we'll look at the game that was played in the penultimate round yesterday between Fabiano and Mishra. In my opinion, which I said on Twitter today, this was Fabiano's best game. And Mishra tied for second, as you all know, except for one thing. So he played bishop b5 check in the Sicilian. Usually Fabi plays d4. Mishra's been playing the Najdorf lately. So he'd figure, since he's playing a kid, he'll get into non-theoretical, positional, strategical kind of stuff. c4 is a move. You can also play a4 or bishop takes bishop. They're all played. Knight c3. And they got into some kind of Marazzi bind where white gladly has traded off his white squared bishop because it's usually behind these pawns. On the other hand, black has less space and wants to trade pieces. So he's trading bishops, so that's good too. Okay, knight c6, queen d3. The queen protects both pawns and doesn't block the bishop. Bishop d2. And Fabi thought about bishop d2, so that's his first think. So this is a very boring position, but white's slightly better because white has more space in the center. White has 2 pawns on the 4th rank, and black has 0 pawns on the 4th rank. So white's controlling more territory in black's position. Also, this game was very long, so it might take up the whole stream. Okay, a6. At some point, black may want to play b5. So if you're like, why did he play a6? If he plays b5, that's why. Okay, rook b1. He wants to get the rook off of this diagonal and perhaps move his b pawn himself and gain some space. Knight g4. Abi wants to play knight e5 and trade pieces and open up the diagonal for his bishop. In a lot of these openings, these kinds of variations, white plays h3 relatively early to stop black from doing that. But I guess Fabi literally didn't care, or figuratively. Queen e2, the knight's coming to e5, so he gets his queen out of the way. Rook fc8, showing his intention when he plays knight e5 to attack the c-pawn, either with knight a5 or one of the knights to e5. The reason he plays this rook to c8 and not this rook is he hopes one day to play b5, and when there's a trade on b5, we open up the a file for the rook. So if black does play b5, these are good squares for the rooks. Knight d5, threatening a triple fork. Black plays the only move, queen to d8. And white played bishop c3. The engine doesn't approve of this move. It thinks that black is equalized. Yay, Boats has live is rating with a party of 1352. I hope you guys had a good stream, and we got to do some kind of collaboration soon. So, you know, hit me up on Twitter or X or something. And let's give a shout out to Boats has live. Okay, we did. And just keep giving them shouts out. And even if they're not streaming, I want you guys to go to Boats has live and wait for them to start. You don't have to go right now, but pretty soon. You rated a good stream because I'm looking at U.S. Championship and U.S. Women's Championship games. Andrea was shouting before I was born. She was shouting, Ben's being born. Etc. Okay, so in this position, black could play the move e6, kicking the knight out, but instead he took, and white took with the pawn. And taking with the pawn is like a very modern treatment of chess. So most weaker players can sort of understand, I mean, they can't, but sort of understand what an isolated pawn is and what a doubled pawn is, and somebody told them that was bad. And what's more important than pawn structure is activity. And most weaker players aren't interested in activity because they don't know what that means. So obviously, by taking with the pawn, our rook is more active because our rook was behind a pawn. And now we're threatening the pawn, and we're threatening knight b6. And Fabi actually has a way to fix his pawn structure, which he did shortly. But before that happens, black has to stop knight b6. Okay, good luck. So the engine wants to play b5, which obviously helps white's pawn structure because white's going to win a pawn. But Abhi played, it's Abhi and Fabi, I never realized that. Abhi played rook a b8, getting out of the fork. And in this position, you could argue, which Yasser and Christian did, that white could repeat moves here, draw by reputation, and he'd probably win the tournament. He was a point ahead of the field, so drawing would keep you, ahead of the field. And obviously the way to do that, and frankly, is knight b6, knight d5, and then if black wants to play for a win, plays rook d7, then knight b6. So Fabi has a draw here if he wants. Okay, and Fabi has the white pieces, and he's playing a low-rated player, and he's trying to clinch the tournament with a round to go, so he doesn't want to draw. And one of the reasons weaker players are weaker than stronger players is weaker players think about nonsense a lot. Okay? And that's why when things happen in the Middle East or things happen in Congress, people go on Twitter and go, this is terrible because blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's what people do. They don't know what's going on. Their information isn't accurate, but they think they know better than everybody else, and they complain nonstop on the internet. And that's because people think about stuff they shouldn't think about because the typical person is quite stupid. And they like being stupid. Okay, being stupid is much freer than not being stupid. If you're not stupid, you got to play the best move every move in chess. You have to. Okay, so you're sitting there going, I'm not stupid. And then you make a good move. And that's hard. Being not stupid is hard. Being stupid's easy. Okay, you could sack your knight. Okay, that's stupid. You could sack your knight here. You could sack your knight here. You could sack your queen. All those moves are stupid and require no thought. And then you could be happy. Okay, and that's what people are. And that's why we're in the situation we're in now. People are stupid. So Fabi, unlike the typical chess player, is good. And he's not stupid. He doesn't think about, I can draw by repetition, and then maybe I'll win the tournament. That's just what stupid people think about. Fabi thinks, I'm Fabi, and this guy's Abhi. And Fabi sounds more authoritative than Abhi. It's like with an F at the beginning. And I'm higher rated than my opponent. I'm better than my opponent. I have a better position. I have the white pieces. And I'm going to play the best moves. And when I play the best moves, I'll win. As a consequence, Fabi won a lot of games in this tournament. He won half of his games before a perfunctory draw in the last round. Okay, but what you should learn about chess from that isn't anything chess related. It's that you're stupid. That's what you should learn. Okay, now what happened to me was I used to be good at chess, and now my brain doesn't work anymore. I forget everything. I can't see anything. So I've become stupid, so I have to stop playing because it's embarrassing. Okay, so he played the move c5. I told you he was going to rectify his pawn structure. And what's funny is black has some issues here with his queen. And after c5, he did not play d takes c5, which would actually be a mistake. If he plays d takes c5, then we can play knight b6 attacking the rook. Probably you move the rook. Then rook d1 attacks the queen. The engine says the other rook is the same, but okay, I would take this rook. Now the queen is almost trapped. It has to go to one of these squares, e8 or f8. Now we play e5, which almost traps this knight. And we're going to play h3, and we're going to play e6. And this knight is very annoying. It's very hard for black to do anything. And the engine says white is winning here, plus 1.6. White has too much initiative. So instead, Abhi played knight e5 to trade pieces, because if he trades pieces, he won't lose. Knight e5, obviously the knight takes, because your knight's hanging. Okay, and f4, and white does a kingside attack, because black's pieces are all on the queen side, and there's no bishop here on g7, because Fabi traded it off. Knight goes back to d7. We mess up black's pawn structure. And then we play f5. So Fabi has a big attack. He has a bind. And the most important thing is his rooks are better. Okay, this rook is useless. This rook is almost useless because it's attacking a pawn that's defended by the knight. But my rook is on this half-open line, and my rook is on this potential open line, and my knight's better than your knight. And Bobby Fischer would like to move f5, because Fischer famously said, you got to give squares to get squares. So he had to give e5 away so he could crush his opponent. So obviously, black played, I was going to say knight e5, but he played queen g5. I guess he can play knight e5 whenever he wants. Rook f4. Fabi's going to double up on the bubble up. Knight e5. He doubles up on the bubble up. And these rooks are just terrible, frankly. Okay, rook c5. You must have heard me saying the rooks are terrible. And the engine says white's completely winning here. Okay, now Fabi played queen e3. And this puts some pressure on black. For example, if I play fg and you play fg, rook f8 check wins your queen. So black has to be careful here. He played rook f8. Engine doesn't like that move. Fabi played queen h3, and he said, well, if you're going to defend the f file, I'll mate you on the h file. I wonder if he actually said that. Okay, now in this position, black doesn't have a lot to do. In fact, I think black's pieces are on the right squares. I don't see moving them anywhere. So black has nothing to do. And in this position, Abhi Mishra played the engine move. Black is just going to lose slowly, so he sacrificed the exchange based on the famous saying, always sack the exchange. E takes D, and now he figures, I have a knight on e5, I'll just chill. I'll just sit here and I won't lose. So he played rook e8, and he said, I'm not going to do anything, you try to beat me. Okay, and Fabi's like, I want the exchange. So, okay. So, FG, Queen E3. And now white has a long technical task ahead of him trying to break through black's defenses. And the two things we can attack are the B7 and the D6 pawns because they're weak. They're not defended. And this one's isolated. And otherwise, I don't see much for white to do other than H4, H5. And I'm not sure that does anything, but I don't see anything else to do. I see attacking these pawns and playing h4, h5. So queen h3 does both. It lets me play h4 if I want, and it lets me play queen b6 with a fork. Queen d8 was played, which stops queen b6. And he played h3, stopping the knight from going to g4 later, but more importantly, giving the king luft. And Abhi says, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit here and try to beat me. Okay, queen d4 pins the knight. Now white's threatening rook f7 check. So he stops it. Rook f6. He wants to play rook e6. Also puts pressure on the d-pawn. He triples on the f-file, tripling up on the bubble up. Now white wants to play rook f8, I assume. Queen b4 threatens the d-pawn. Knight c4 defends. Plays rook f2, getting his rook off of the square that's attacked. So far, white's not doing very much. Now he wants to play queen e8. You can't play b5 because queen takes a6. So he plays queen here, stopping queen e8. Queen back to d1. And he gives up a pawn on c3. And black is still lost, but it's close. Now if we trade queens, that walks into a fork. So he plays queen check. Knight back to e5. So white hasn't done much the last 10 moves. Rook d1. Rook f2. And nothing much is happening. Black has good drawing chances. And they trade queens, which I guess black has to do because black's queen is attacked, his pawn is attacked, and his rook is attacked. And the engine agrees trading queens is correct. Attacks the pawn on g5. Sacrifices the d-pawn. And Fabi wants to play rook b8, rook takes b7 with a winning position. So, problem with black's position is if I was black, I would want to play rook b5 so that after rook b8, I could play rook takes b6. However, after rook b5, we can check and take the pawn on d6, defending our pawn on b6. And because Abhi played g5 and h5, his king could get checkmated on the 7th and 8th rank. My rook goes to the 6th rank, my other rook goes to the 7th rank, so forth. So Abhi plays g4. Now he won't get checkmated because his king can walk up. Rook g8 check, forcing the king to the h-file. And then rook b8. Very nice. Rook takes check. And Fabi has a passed d-pawn that's basically too strong. Too strong. King g7. Let's see what happens on knight d7, because that's the move I would have played. Then it says rook here check. Rook takes g4. And then I guess white wants to play rook f3, rook h3 mate. Yeah, it says +5 for white. So he played king g7, stopping the white rook from coming over here. White finally played b7. Black gave a couple checks. And now if you play knight takes b7, I can play rook c7, winning your knight. So he played knight d7, check. Rook takes a6. And white's up too much material. Abhi played on about 10 more moves. And eventually white sacrificed the exchange. Always sacrifice the exchange. And black's king is absurdly far away. Now, if I had white in this position, I would play rook c1. Well, maybe I'd play g6. It says they both win. I just like the king here. But okay, he played g6. I guess I would do this. Yeah. Okay, and then Black resigned. And the reason Black resigned and why you shouldn't resign is White's going to win the rook for his pawn, and then he has to know how to mate with a rook. Some of your opponents can't mate with a rook, so you shouldn't resign. But Fabi can mate with a rook. So then resigning is reasonable. Pinned by trying to learn. No! I hate when things are pinned. Can you explain to bind and what can be done against? How do you unpin stuff? Ah, that's better. I hate when things are pinned. Well, the Marazzi bind, which is probably the only bind in chess, we're stopping Black from playing d5, and Black doesn't want to play e5 because that weakens everything. So these pawns are putting Black in a bind because Black can't advance in the center or break out with d5. Although Black sometimes does break out with d5 by playing e6 and rook d8 and so forth. So this is the bind, and then usually when you're in a bind and you have less space, you want to trade pieces, which Abi did. But eventually Fabi went forward, and since Fabi has an extra, letter before Abi, he won the game. Next time Abi will change his name. I mean, what's funny is Fabi and Abi aren't either one of their names. That's what we call them. I mean, you don't call him Abi because you don't know him, but I know him, so. Etc. There's other kinds of binds, like on your wedding day, but that's a different story altogether. Hey, we're on Chess TV, iChess TV. I decided to look at some games from the U.S. Championship and U.S. Women's Championship. Did I miss anybody giving anything? Blunt Chief resubscribed for 4 months. Tom AXD subscribed. Thanks, guys.